All right, guys, here it is. Our deep dive of Choir of One. This is the new craftable exotic dropping in Echoes Act 3 from the exotic mission called Encore. Now, we did a guide on this already. We've also done a brief overview of this exotic, but as we began to dig deeper and deeper into this thing, it's wild, guys. And what's even crazier is that this weapon, what you see, is only going to get better with intrinsic upgrades every single week, with additional exotic catalysts. This is merely the beginning. So let's begin. Choir of One is the first ever special ammo auto rifle in Destiny 2. And if you thought special ammo sidearms were meta defining, I urge you to get Choir of One. And it's really interesting to see Bungie push in this direction, right? We're starting to see this bleed, this combination of archetypes and weapons that, in my opinion, really started last year after the crafting. I feel like once Bungie saw that and saw how the community felt about it, they were like, hell, let's do it. Let's start merging things. Let's get crazy. Now, to start off with the perks on Choir of One, it comes with the exotic trait Fanatical Lance, which reads that rapid final blows causes targets to explode into a pool of Radiolarian fluids. Hip firing launches multiple projectiles at once in a slower moving spread pattern. Projectiles detonate on impact. Now, for the weapon's intrinsic, we have Command Frame. Fires extended range, heavy caliber projectiles at a reduced rate of fire. Deals increased precision damage when aiming down sights. Now let's break down how these traits work. First, let's start with Fanatical Lance. Again, it reads that rapid final blows causes targets to explode into a pool of Radiolarian fluids. Now this works almost identical to how the origin traits on our seasonal weapons, those Vex themed weapons that we're really big fans of. It takes about 3 rapid final blows, and then the target will explode, dealing AoE damage around the targets, and then that Radiolaria pool will then drop. Now, similar to our Vex weapons, the pool is cool, but not super practical. It doesn't really last that long. Here on Choir of One, though, it does about 4,215 damage, and honestly, it's pretty rare that enemies even ended up walking through that Radiolaria pool. Now, unfortunately, this has no synergy with our artifact mods like Logic Reductor, as with it equipped, the pool was still dealing the same damage to Vex enemies and didn't last any longer, which I know logically makes sense, but sometimes there is some overlap. Now, the next part of the perk reads that hip firing launches multiple projectiles at once in a slow moving spread pattern, and then they detonate on impact. Now, as you see here, guys, we have 25 shots in the magazine, and each hip fire shot consumes 5 ammo for that projectile spread. Now, the damage here when hip firing is insane. If you land all projectiles, this is giving us a whopping 35,382 damage per shot just here at Carl. This is actually really unique, guys. You can see it that when you fire it, it starts off as like a single projectile, which then will split off into 5 weaker projectiles after about 7.5 meters. Huge thanks to Mossy Max on Twitter for pointing this out. He found out that the single projectile that it starts out as does about 10% more damage than the sum of the 5 weaker projectiles. So as long as you're within 7.5 meters, you'll be getting at 35,382 damage that we were getting here at Carl. Now, once the projectile splits, if all of those connect, you'll be getting a max damage of 32,015 damage here at Carl. Thus, that 10% difference. Now, funny enough, we actually noticed this first inside of PvP, as we were still able to get the one-shot kill within 7.5 meters. Matter of fact, inside of PvE, you could still get the full 35,382 damage, even with only 1 shot left in the map, as long as you are within range. I'm actually really curious to know if like this is intentional on Bungie's part, because it's super handy. You can imagine clearing ads with Choir. Then you come across a single health target, maybe you don't have but 1 or 2 rounds left in your mag. As long as you're within range, it's still worth shooting from the hip, as you're going to get the full damage. This fire mode outputs a lot of damage insanely fast, which means you're also going to chew through ammo. And I would actually say for my folks that are going to use this weapon in a dedicated loadout, reserve perks are going to be your friend, as well as scav perks. Now, considering how much ammo it can chew through, I actually prefer to use Choir of One in its auto rifle form, literally aiming down sights, and only using the hip fire form when up against a champion or a mini boss or something with higher health. That'll be your best bang for your buck in terms of ammo conservation. And honestly, when aiming down sights, and we'll go over the damage numbers in just a moment, your damage is fantastic. Plenty of damage to clear ads. Now, before we move on, I do want to mention that yes, this is literally the Wyvern Blast that you have been killed by over and over inside of PvE, especially Grandmaster Nightfalls. That's literally what this gun is. Now, when you aim down sights, Choir of One will now lean into Command Frame. This is what gives us our extended range, and it increases our precision damage. Now, this is actually interesting because yesterday when we were testing this inside of PvP, that was one thing we noticed, is that the range was really high on this weapon, reaching up to 40 meters. Something that shouldn't make sense given the range stat, but it was because of command frame that it was boosting this. Now, when aiming down sights, you're only consuming 1 ammo per shot. And right here at Carl, we're doing 12,212 damage to the head. This is the mode of the gun you want to use for clearing ads. It's pretty much always going to be able to one-tap most red bars and even orange bar enemies. A lot of people are actually kind of comparing this weapon to like a sniper rifle, considering the range on it and the sheer damage that it puts out. But I really do like the blend here, where you can go from being this lethal, long range, practically almost sniper, but with the ease of use of an auto rifle. But then at the same time, if something pushes too close or you're up against a high health target, you can immediately chew them down with that Wyvern Blast. And that's how the base version of Choir 1 works. Keep in mind, this is the base version. This thing is only going to get better. We have additional intrinsic upgrades that we're going to be getting each week, as well as exotic catalysts. Now, with this being week 1, we have access to Command Frame 2, which we have a guide on, which allows us to change up our barrel perks when crafting, and of course, it bumps up our stats. We also have Subsistence as our catalyst for this week. Again, defeating targets partially reloads the magazine from reserves. Now, for a primary auto rifle, this is about 17% of the magazine reloaded from reserves on each kill. And it seems to work the exact same way here with this special auto rifle. Now, Subsistence isn't a bad perk by any means. It is a bit basic, especially considering that we do have an artifact mod that's literally Subsistence already. That being Targeting Autoloader, which is a really, really good mod for auto rifles, guys. We're talking Subsistence and a damage buff baked into one. Now, we're gonna have a complete breakdown of all of these artifact mods, but just roughly looking at Targeting Autoloader, it really is just a better version of Subsistence. At 1 stack, it refills 20% of the mag. You can go up to a maximum of 5 stacks. And again, at 5 stacks, you're refilling 40% of your mag from reserves. And then on top of that, you've got the bonus damage, which maxes out at 20% at 5 stacks. But where things are really going to take off here for Choir of 1 is when we start to get into these other exotic catalysts. Next week, we're going to get access to Destabilizing rounds, where final blows causes nearby targets to become volatile. Now, let me just say, Destabilizing rounds isn't as strong, at least in my opinion, in comparison to Incandescent or even Volt Shot, since for some reason, Bungie has given it a cooldown, unlike our other subclass synergies. At the same time, if you're a hunter, you could literally just rock Gerfalcons or even Spirit of Gerfalcons to achieve this right now, which is why I think the third and final catalyst is what's going to set this one apart, and that is Onslaught. This will be the best pick for this weapon, at least in my opinion. Onslaught reads that final blows to this weapon increases its rate of fire, which is great considering that the rounds per minute on this auto rifle is 225. Onslaught will stack up to 3 times, it lasts for 4.5 seconds, and it will substantially increase our rate of fire. Not only does it increase our rate of fire though, but it also increases our reload speed. We're talking plus 15 reload at just 1 stack, plus 25 at 2 stacks, and plus 35 at 3 stacks. I think what we're really questioning here, guys, and this is why we're going to be doing more damage testing as time goes on, is could we perhaps stack multiple stacks of Onslaught and then turn around and hip fire with Choir of 1, literally blowing our load almost instantly at Onslaught times 3. Yes, it's some hoops to jump around, but you can imagine being in something like a Grandmaster Nightfall, popping some shots off, getting multiple stacks of Onslaught, and then a champion runs up to you and you literally can just blow your load into them and take them out. For the time being though, let's go over the damage numbers as they are now. Most notably, how does it compare to some other top special weapons? Now keep in mind, this isn't a full damage test, this is just a snapshot of how good Choir is. But for this test, we have Will of Radiance, we have Lunafaction Boots, we had a Div Bubble, just to make it a bit easier and consistent throughout. Starting with Choir of 1, aiming down sights, our output was 1,336,000 damage, giving us a DPS value of 48,115. Now for the hipfire mode, our total damage was 2,306,336 and gave us a whopping DPS value of 100,132. That is a big jump, fellas. And by the way, that's like super high. Like if we were to go back and pull back charts of even our heavy weapons, you'll see that Choir is nuts. And keep in mind, this is a special weapon. But how does this compare to our other special weapons? I kind of wanted to also compare this to like some primary weapons that are also turned special. For instance, Buried Bloodline. Our total damage here for Buried Bloodline was 935,388 with a DPS value of 33,327. Keep in mind though, we do have a 15% debuff from Divinity already. What makes Buried Bloodline so good is the ability to apply Weaken by itself. Next up, we have Still hunt. Using both its normal sniper shot and its golden gun shots, our total damage was 1,205,165 with a DPS of 47,667. So comparable to Quire's ADS firing mode, but of course, Quire has way more ammo. Next up, we have Fourth Horseman, the undisputed king for a very long time in terms of DPS. Its total damage is not that good at 1,033,563, but its DPS value is a whopping 90,663. Again, keep in mind, Fourth Horseman can blow its load in just 11 seconds. That's why its DPS is so high. Caveat is it's a bit uncontrollable, and of course, its ammo reserves isn't that good. But what's so incredible is that Quire actually beats Fourth Horseman here. Now, last but not least, I wanted to take a look at Merciless, both with Impetus and Conserve Momentum procced. Merciless has a total damage of 1,565,989 with a DPS of 111,324. Guys, there's a reason why people use Merciless in solo runs. It puts out, man. Now, granted, am I jumping through some hoops? Yes. We're proccing Impetus, we're boosting that damage, and at the same time, this is Quire of 1 without leaning into any artifact mods or without even proccing things like Onslaughts. But I think two things were answered from this data. Number one, Quire, in my opinion, doesn't need to be nerfed. I actually think this is okay, guys. Is it really good? Absolutely. But it is comparable to some of our best special weapons. And number two, Quire's total damage is really the thing we should be praising. And that's due to the fact that it's not just a special weapon, but it's a special auto rifle. And so it's the combination of these things that make it arguably one of the best exotics we have ever gotten. That total damage allows it to not only just be good for brief bursts of DPS, but literally extended damage phases, Grandmaster Nightfalls. It's one of those weapons that you're not going to find yourself in a pinch as much, which means you can lean on it almost like a primary. Almost. Again, scavenger perks, reserve perks, those things are important, especially if you're hip firing. Now, as time goes on, we'll just have to see how this looks with the rest of our intrinsic upgrades, the other catalysts. But for the time being, Quire of 1 is a fantastic weapon, guys. We've got overload auto rifles in the game. We've got sustained fire. We've got targeting autoloader, which amps things up even further. We haven't even gotten into builds because yes, we can literally get into a Spirit of Gerfalcon build right now if we wanted to, and this thing gets crazy. But if you're wondering, is this exotic worth going after? Absolutely. The Encore exotic mission is a very approachable exotic mission with a number of folks able to complete it solo. Yes, you do have to progress the seasonal quests, but if you want to check out our guide on it, you most definitely can. Now, with that being said, for PvE, let's talk PvP. This weapon does 71 damage per crit, 39 damage per body. This means when aiming down sights, you're able to get a kill in 0.8 seconds, 3 crits, 1 body. Now, the damage fall off when aiming down sights is 40 meters. Now, despite the ammo economy being really solid inside of PvE, inside of PvP, it's not good, guys. You get 5 shots. That is only 1 blast when shooting from the hip, and only 5 shots when aiming down sights. You have enough to literally just give yourself 1 kill, and that's if you're almost perfect. You're kind of in a situation like you are with Forerunner, but arguably even worse. Now, what this weapon does possess is the ability to one-tap. And yes, you can one-tap up to 10 meters when shooting from the hip. This means that if somebody actually pushes you and you need to use this weapon as like a shotgun, you can. Or like a fusion rifle, you could do that. And within 10 meters, if you have 5, you can get the kill. Now, funny enough, you can also get the one-tap on Guardians even with 1 shot, but you do have to be even closer, meaning you have to be within 7.5 meters of your enemy. But even if you only have 1 shot, when you hip fire, that will give you the kill. Now, keep in mind, hip firing has travel time. This is a projectile. Again, it's that same Wyvern blast. This is not something I would recommend going inside of PvP and just start blasting. Personally, I think Quire of 1 could be a meme weapon inside of PvP, but it's definitely built more for PvE, which for my PvE players, this is probably a good thing. This means less likely to get nerfed. So guys, that's it. That is Quire of 1 and our deep dive. Again, as time goes on, we'll continue to test things out. We'll do a few builds on it. Is this exotic very, very strong? Absolutely. And I also think it's pretty comparable to some of our other exotics, the only outlier being that total damage. We'll see how things shake out over the next few weeks, especially once we get Onslaught. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.